Okay, let's get started. My name is Andrew Miller. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for SolarWinds, and my product is EDR, the Endpoint Detection and Response. Now, for some of you, that's a term you're quite familiar with. For others, this is an introduction, so we'll be inviting questions. So let's go through some housekeeping. You're all on mute, so we can keep on track with the presentation, have nice, clean audio. There is a Q&A window, so a questions window. If you have any questions for me, please type them in the questions window. It'll show up on my monitor. Ask questions as we go. I will try and answer the questions as we go through. If it makes sense to wait until the demonstration to answer your questions, I'll do that then. And if you have questions that maybe have not been asked before, I'll certainly clear them at the very end. So you're on mute. Please use the questions pod to ask the questions. As we go, just feed them in. This session is being recorded and you will be given a link to the recording afterwards. So, as I said, my name is Andrew Miller, Senior Product Marketing Manager. I've worked for a long time. I worked as a system integrator, I worked as a reseller, and I've also owned my own MSP focused on telecom. So the businesses that you are running today are very similar to the businesses that I've run and I've been involved with. So hopefully some of our language, apart from English, will match, and I'll have a good understanding of what you need to do, and I'll be able to explain the value to you. Security is a passion for me. I actually hold 2 patents for security products, but I've always been a marketer. And right now, even though you can't see me, I'm actually moving my hands to help tell this story. So let's talk about the changing threat landscape. And the threat landscape is changing. 3 years ago, if I had said to you, so what about ransomware? Are any of your customers worried about it? You would have said, I remember reading about ransomware, but no, none of my customers are worried. Most of my customers don't even know. If I was to ask that same question today, you'd go, well, a number of my customers have been hit by ransomware. And sometimes we've been able to solve it. Sometimes we've had to pay a ransom. Sometimes we've just had to start over and re-image that device. So I'm going to talk about the timeline of how viruses have changed and how malware has changed over the last, say, 3 to 5 year window, and even how quickly it's changing today. There's a couple of new terms I want to bring up. It's not just viruses and malware. There are other terms that you're going to hear. And some of these new threats are very, very different. So we'll talk about why they're different and why the protection to protect against them needs to be different. We'll talk about how malware has evolved and how it's constantly evolving. And then we'll talk about how you can be that superhero and you can remediate those types of threats. So in 1987, yes, there were computers back in 1987. Antivirus was a program that was written to detect known problems. And every time a problem was found, there was a signature that was developed for that problem, and antivirus compared things to that signature and said, aha, we recognize this file as being something that's bad. In 87, antivirus had to make a change. It had to start looking at the behavior. So it had to be smart enough to understand, when I see this, here are the appropriate ways I should react when I see it. In 2005, ransomware started. Now, it wasn't mainstream because ransomware was still targeting specific types of businesses and specific people. In 2017, malware has gone mainstream. Everybody knows what a computer virus is all over the world. By the end of 2018, there were 880 million different forms of malware that had been recognized by avtest.org, which is an organization that tracks this malware. And they also determined there's 350,000 new threats every day. Now, if we're using the technology that was built back in 1987, which was developing a signature and comparing to it, it's going to take some time to compare against 880 million known threats. And there's going to be some exposure because there's 350,000 new ones every single day. So the world has changed. And the reason it's changed is we have this polymorphic malware. And what this means is this is malware that's changing the way it looks. So going by a signature is just very simply a hash of a file. But if that file changes with one single byte being changed, that file is now a new threat. And polymorphic malware is the type of malware that can download. And once it downloads onto your machine, it creates a new file, it downloads, it changes its characteristics. So it's going to defeat the standard antivirus. There are supply chain attacks where not only are people, the malicious actors, targeting to get payment details, credit cards, user credentials, and so forth, they're also looking to stop your business. And therefore, you will pay to restart your business. If you open up any web page, any newspaper web page anywhere in the world, within the last 7 days, there will be a ransomware attack in your country where somebody has resorted to paying the attacker. The data that's been encrypted is so valuable, and this is a last resort, and people have done it. Just this morning, there were 2 government organizations in the US that paid $1.1 million of ransom just in the last 7 days because there was no other way to get the data back. There's also compressed code and packers. What compressed code is, a piece of code inside another piece of code. So the original scan may not find it, but certainly when that program executes, it causes a problem. A packer is something that will change its characteristics. But let's just break away from those standard file-based attacks and look at fileless. Traditional antivirus requires it to be a file. And when that file lands, i.e. it comes off a USB device, it comes as an email attachment, it gets downloaded from a website, it gets scanned. But if there's no file, the antivirus won't do anything. It won't offer any protection. So in order to combat these new types of threats, a new type of protection, and the kind of protection you'll hear about is the endpoint detection and response, next generation antivirus, or next generation endpoint protection platform. These are some of the terms you may hear. So let's talk about these threats. I've already alluded to the fact that traditional AV is very much signature based. Once a threat has been identified, a signature is developed for it, and that signature is shared through a database, so everybody else who's using that product will consult those signatures and go, aha, this file is known by this signature and therefore it's bad. But the latest evolution does everything it can to avoid that detection. So a couple of years ago, you would have seen antivirus tools looking at the behavior of a file. It may not be recognized as being bad because it's very new, but it's observed, it's opened up in a sandbox environment, a virtual machine, and its behavior is scanned. And if it looks like it's trying to do something malicious, it's flagged as being a piece of malware. Well, of course, the people writing the malware go, well, wait a second, I need to write a piece of malware that can't be detected by signature, that can't be detected by behavior. So what do? They examine the environment. If there is no mouse click or no keyboard press, it's not a real machine, it's a virtual machine. Therefore, the malware will stay silent. It will not do anything. And the antivirus tool, you're relying on behavior, will look at that and go, it's not a threat, and will release it into the system. And then that's going to cause a problem. So I talked about fileless. Scripts on websites have the capability to invoke scripts on your machine, so they may call PowerShell to do certain things. Or a document. We've all had those emails where we've been told that our company, or you specifically, owe money, and there's an invoice attached that you must look at. Well, if you open that invoice and you don't have the security features turned on, or you allow scripts to be executed, that document can contain code that can infect the machine. So threats are ever changing. They've gone fileless. They're no longer just exes. They can be documents with scripts inside them. So let's talk about how we need to protect against those things. Today's traditional antivirus works on pre-execution. So before it starts doing something, let's stop it. So a signature was very good when there was a small number of threats. Comparing a new file to a list of signatures is a really good defense. But of course, as the number of malware threats has increased to almost 1 billion, comparing a new file, its signatures to a list of known signatures was going to take a long time to do. plus the fact that over 350,000 new threats are discovered every single day, means that at some point those signatures cannot keep up, or the processing time to use those signatures cannot keep up, and therefore we cannot stop everything pre-execution. So advanced remediation is required. That's where endpoint detection and response comes in. Not only does it protect you pre-execution, it also protects you on execution and post-execution. Now, this sounds a little bit strange. You're thinking, but why would you let it work and then offer me protection? Well, as we go through the demo, you'll see this. But on execution, when something bad starts to happen, we can detect that something bad is happening and we can stop it. So some of the features of endpoint detection and response are using shadow copy, VSS. We take snapshots of all of your important files, all the files, all the time. When an attack has been launched and recognized, we have the ability to roll back the registry to where it was pre-attack, roll back the file system to where it was pre-attack, and replace any compromised files with pre-attack healthy versions. And the reason we can do this is we're constantly monitoring on execution. We know every single thing that piece of malware has done, therefore we know exactly what to do to reverse its effects. And post-execution, so after that attack has happened, we can do something called remediation, we can do something called rollback. All of us have faced a situation where you've been stung by a virus. You think you've got rid of the problem, you reboot the machine, the problem is still there. Likely, something has happened to the registry. So in this case, we can actually roll back those changes within the registry. So the next generation of antivirus, I've alluded to some of these. There are limits to the legacy antivirus tool you're using today. Now, when I say there's limits, we always have to match the risk that's acceptable to the small business to the cost of protection. So a traditional antivirus tool may be all the protection you need to manage the risk for one business, but for another business that absolutely has to be up and running all the time, they have a different level of risk, a different appetite. Therefore, they need a much higher level of protection. So I'll talk about what some of the benefits are of EDR, but I'll show you a quick demonstration as well. So I talked about the signature approach. Well, there's 880 million threats available. So that's 880 million signatures growing at 350,000 every single day. Traditional antivirus cannot keep up with those signatures. Plus, the time it takes to update every device to get the new signatures is going to take time. And with that many threats being born every single day, the chances are that a threat is going to hit that end device and the antivirus tool is not going to recognize it and the attack is going to be successful. So what are the benefits of using a new type of defense? Well, there's reduced downtime with better detection because we're able to detect before, during, and after. We're able to roll back the effects. There's faster recovery through automated remediation, and you'll see this as I do the demonstration. You'll see that a threat has been detected and automatically it's dealt with. It's not just here's an alert, but here's how we've actually solved it. I'll show you rollback actually happening in real time. This is where compromised files are being replaced with the pre-attack healthy version. And I'll show you how it's going to protect your network. And the way it can do this, if we have time, I'll go into the product, but there are 8 separate artificial intelligence engines that are constantly learning, constantly adapting, constantly communicating with each other to keep that protection as strong as it can be. Now, I'm going to go into a demonstration. I'm going to do the demonstration twice. So what you're going to see is you're going to see an end user desktop, so a Windows desktop. You're going to see a limited number of files. I'm going to paste in a real live ransomware attack and you're going to see what happens. After that thing has been solved, I'm going to rerun the same attack with one small configuration change, so it will not be automatic remediation, and I'll show you some of the power within the product, how I'm going to remediate it. Now, of course, this presentation is going to be shared with you as is a recording later on. So let me start the demonstration. So here's my end user desktop. over on the side there, I've got a folder up and it's got some JPEG images in there. Now, the reason I've got them there is typically when ransomware attacks, it's going to start encrypting files. And one of the file types it encrypts are images. So you'll be able to see the effects of what's happening. So this is my Windows desktop. Sorry, this is my sample Windows desktop. Let's just make sure it's actually a healthy environment. So I'm going to bring up SentinelOne and it's going to tell me no threats have been detected. I'm going to go into Windows Update and I'm going to show you that this is actually a really nicely protected machine. So completely up to date here. Now I'm going to paste in a piece of ransomware. So it's now on the desktop. SentinelOne has detected that that file has been detected. You'll notice that I get an alert and you'll also notice that the file has disappeared. So that's the automatic remediation. My machine is quite healthy. If I go into the Sentinel One console, I can have a look at the attack and I can see what actually happened here. So as I go through, I can see what happened. It was killed and quarantined. This is the storyline. I can see the indicators of compromise and I can see that this has been resolved. It is being completely mitigated. So right now there is no longer a problem. So what I'm going to do, I told you I was going to run the demonstration twice. And I'm going to go into the configuration. I'm going to change from being kill and quarantine. I'm going to say only give me an alert. So if a threat happens, I want to know about it, but don't do anything automatically. So back to my end user desktop, I'm going to paste in that piece of malware. I get an alert that the threat's been detected, but that's all I get is an alert. Let's run this. And of course, Windows has said, hey, are you really sure you want? Sure, yes. So I'm going to allow this to run. And as this runs, what it's going to do, it's created some files on my desktop. And if you look over at my folder of images, they're no longer images, they're now encrypted files. It's now changed my desktop wallpaper to tell me there's a problem. And if I open up the help SOS file on my desktop, here's the instructions on how I can decrypt my machine and how I need to send them money. But I'm protected by SolarWinds EDR powered by SentinelOne. So let's close down this message. Let's go back over to my Sentinel One console. And I can see that I'm affected. So there are some unresolved threats. And I'm going to select rollback. And I'm going to say continue. So the action's successful. Let's go back to my desktop. You'll see that it's rolled back those files. It's gotten rid of the new files. It's going to change my desktop wallpaper. And it has now replaced my encrypted files with the pre-attack healthy versions. So this is how SentinelOne operates. So SolarWinds EDR, this is how it works. Now, some people are asking, is this a replacement for a managed antivirus? My answer is yes and no. Depending on the risk appetite of your customer. So if your customer, they have a business, they have email, they do standard things that a business does. If they have an appetite where they're prepared to be down for an hour or half a day, they have all their confidential information is protected and backed up, antivirus may be sufficient for them. But if they're an online business and they need to be up and running every single hour of the day, and they cannot afford any level of downtime, well, greater protection that will come from EDR would be suitable for them. Now, if I look to within an organization like SolarWinds, for myself, based on the fact that all of my files are stored on a network share, they're backed up all the time, managed antivirus is good enough protection for me. When I look at some of our financial people, I look at some of our sales management, or I look at our CEO, they have a lot of confidential information on their laptops, which is not being saved to the server because it's confidential. And for them, EDR is probably a better way to manage the risk for their particular need. So if you're ready for more, if you want to know, well, how can I get started with EDR? How can I start selling it? How do I start this new recurring revenue? How do I start offering a new differentiated service? Contact your distributor and they can certainly help you out. Now, there's a couple of questions that have been coming in. So what I'd like to do, as opposed to just answering them in words, I'd like to take you into the Sentinel One Console, and I'll give you a little bit more of a demonstration as to how the product actually works. So this is the Sentinel One Console. And if I go over here to Network, okay. So up here, I have the ability to blacklist. So I can allow or block applications and websites. So I can make sure that my customer cannot go to those websites. They can't go to Gmail, they can't go to Facebook, or I can bar them from going to certain devices. Packages is how you actually download the actual SentinelOne SolarWinds product. Of course, if you're using our RMM or N-central platforms, you can actually use an automated script to push this package out. Firewall control gives me the ability to allow or block traffic across the network. So if I want to make sure that the people in my online sales group can do their business, they would be allowed to communicate with the central server where the data is stored. Maybe some of the other people in the organization don't need to do that, so I can adjust that firewall so they cannot have access to all the servers. When it comes to device control, I can allow or block, depending on how I define it, USB storage devices from being plugged in. We've all heard this story where a penetration tester or a white hat hacker has left a USB jump drive outside in the car park, and someone's reached over, plugged it into a machine, hoping, well, if I can see what files are on here, I know who it belongs to. Well, I can block external USB devices from coming in. Exclusions allows me to exclude certain apps from being scanned. So for instance, I was working with a customer in the south of France, and they had a custom financial application that was moving files across the network. Now, moving files across the network isn't bad all by itself, but it is one of the traits of how malware works. So they're able to exclude their application from being scanned. This is where I want to spend a little bit more time and tell you more about the features of it. I did mention that SolarWinds EDR has 8 separate artificial intelligence engines. So we can do a deep file inspection. We can look for suspicious files. We can look for executables. We can look for those documents and scripts, so those weaponized documents. So whether it's a Word doc, an Excel doc, or a PDF with some embedded script, we know how to scan for that and we can stop those things. Lateral movement is where a program tries to move across the network. Now, sometimes you do want that. You want everybody writing files to a central server, to a shared device on a server. Other times, being able to write anything other than a data file may be something you wish to disallow. There's also the anti-exploitation of the file list. This is how it catches those attacks which don't present a file to the device, but are trying to invoke a PowerShell script or something else. Then, of course, you've got your potentially unwanted applications or programs. I personally use a program called FileZilla. Wonderful piece of software. It's free. It gives me full FTP control. But depending on which version you download, you may get FileZilla or you may get FileZilla plus another utility. Now, that utility may be harmless, or it may try and download something else. So, of course, we want to be aware of those things. When it comes to the protection mode, right now I'm in remediate, which means that if it finds a threat, it's going to fix the problem. During the demonstration, the first time through I was on remediate. The second time through I was alert only, which was tell me about the problem, but don't fix it, because I want to be able to drill down and have a good look at it. Now, in terms of protection level, I can do a kill and quarantine. So if I find a problem, kill it, quarantine it. Remediate will go that extra step further. It will delete the extra files. It will reverse the changes to the registry. Rollback is where it will reach out and it will grab pre-attack healthy versions of the file and replace the compromised versions with these pre-attack versions. Now, I did mention I was working with a customer in France, and one of the issues they had working with a bank was one of their devices was infected with ransomware. and they needed to disconnect that device from the network. It was a simple matter of pulling the cable off the back of the machine. Well, the second time it hit, it happened on a number of devices. They weren't able to understand which devices, so they pulled the server off the network. Well, through software, we can choose to disconnect from the network. So if a threat has been detected, we can choose to disconnect that device directly from the network. So this is the type of configuration that we have available to us and the level of protection we have. Now, I'm just going to go back up. I'm going to choose one of these threats. Let's have a look at this one right here. So this one here tells me this device is actually infected. And if I drill down, here's more information about that threat. And this is a demo system, so don't worry about it. So this is unresolved, but it's been blocked. And if I click here on the storyline, what you can see is that the agent.exe has called agent.exe, which by itself isn't a huge deal, but that's what the storyline did. If I just back up, what you'll see is this particular threat called itself, called itself, called itself, called itself, called itself, and so on and so forth. So it's a piece of malware constantly calling itself and causing some problems here. Because we know exactly what it did, when we select remediate, we're able to undo all of those changes. So that's when I talk about we can stop things pre-attack, or we can stop things during the attack, but after the attack and post-execution, because we know everything that happened, we can turn this back. Now, some of you may be wondering, why would I want to allow an attack to take place, or why would I not stop it automatically? Well, if you think about it, Windows patch, when you go to patch devices, it's changing things on devices. You wouldn't want your defenses to undo those changes. So those type of things, we need to allow them to happen and then to be observed. And if they are recognized with those 8 artificial intelligence engines, then something, of course, would be stopped. Oh, sorry, there is a question. Is there an MSP portal for SentinelOne to have an overview over every customer? No. So the SolarWinds has the ability to look at the provisioned customers, but SentinelOne does not have the ability to look into it. This program is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. So as long as you're running those operating systems, you have protection from SolarWinds EDR. The rollback is available on Windows only. It's coming from Mac, but there's no announced date for it. And that looks like I've finished the list of questions. If there are any additional questions, please type them into the question pod, and I'll do my best to either answer in words or to show you within the product exactly how you can do this. So as long as, sorry, the question coming up, how would this work on terminal servers? As long as it's running Windows, Linux, or a Mac operating system, we can offer protection through EDR. One thing I should point out, I cannot show you this. There is a tamper-proof setting within the product. So of course, if a piece of malware comes in and tries to turn off protection, it's not able to do that. When I heard we had this feature, I went looking for it, I couldn't find it. I do not have sufficient privileges to be able to examine the tamper-proof settings, so I cannot turn them off accidentally. Oh, very good question. Has this ever blocked an attack coming from Emotet? So Emotet, if you've been reading the news in the last, I say, week, Emotet has been the latest malware to hit. Yes, so SolarWinds EDR, SentinelOne has blocked those attacks. I do not have a copy of that ransomware, so sorry, a copy of Emotet, so I can't show it to you. What I would have you do is, if you're interested in seeing this, go to YouTube, do a search for SentinelOne, all one word, and then the name of the threat. So whether it's Matrix, whether it's WannaCry, whether it's Petya, not Petya, Emotet, have a look, and chances are they've already recorded a video how they do that. Do we block even fileless script malware? Yes, we do. These are the fileless attacks where you may be on a website or a weaponized document that is trying to invoke run DLL on your machine or PowerShell. Those attacks are stopped as they happen. Any other questions? Okay. So can you specify what triggers the auto isolation in more detail? So within the policy settings, if I'm in protect mode, sorry, this is a demo system, it's not turned on right now. If I said disconnect from network, once a threat had been detected, the alert given, if I'm set to remediate, disconnect from network would happen. If I was set to alert only, I would receive the alert, but the disconnect would not happen. Another question of, will EDR replace SolarWinds MSP antivirus? The answer is no. For the MSP, you need both tools in your toolbox. You need a good antivirus solution, and for some of your customers, you'll need an EDR solution depending on their appetite for risk and how you want to manage it. So both sets of tools are required by the MSP. For the actual customer, some customers may be quite happy and served very well with antivirus. Some customers may require EDR, and even within the customer, you might want to have some devices protected by antivirus, some protected by EDR. It all turns out to how you want to manage that risk. So although this can be a replacement, we're not positioning it as a replacement. This is just an extra tool. If you were a car mechanic and you had the choice between using a ratchet or a wrench, well, some days the ratchet is the better tool, but other days the wrench is the better tool. So when it comes to protection, sometimes managed antivirus is a good enough tool, and sometimes EDR gives you additional capabilities. For me personally, if my children were small and tended to click on everything on the home computer, I'd probably want EDR. But now that my children have grown up, they understand a bit more and they can actually read those dialog boxes. Antivirus is probably strong enough for me at home. Oh, great question. Thank you very much. So will the forensics of a malware, can it, sorry, two questions here. What about undetected threats? So there are always going to be undetected threats. We know that the people writing these threats are constantly trying to get around the standard defense. That's why they'll get around the traditional antivirus. But because SolarWinds EDR is protecting pre-execution, during execution, and after execution, if a threat has been detected, it may not have been detected when it came in. It may have gone to sleep for 30 days. As it wakes up and starts to do something, we will notice that behavior, we'll track it. When we determine and judge it to be a threat, then we will shut it down, and then full remediation and rollback are available at whatever point it gets caught. Is there a chance that there's a threat that will never become detected? I'd be a fool if I said absolutely. There will always be a threat that will get past the immediate detection, but once it starts to behave in a malicious manner, it will be detected, it will be stopped. Will the forensics, so the forensics, let me just go back into and one of these threats here. So I'll choose this one right here. So I'm looking at this threat. Okay, not a good one to choose. Sorry, there's a couple of things I want to choose, but I've got to choose the right threat. This is the dashboard, and this shows me this is unresolved, but it's been mitigated. I did show you the attack storyline for one of the threats. There's also a raw data report that will tell me exactly what happened during that attack. So therefore, when I wish to roll it back, I know exactly what has happened, and all those tools are available to me. Now, the way that rollback works, it is a customized wrapper for Microsoft VSS, so shadow copy. Shadow copy always takes snapshots of your disk and stores them on the same disk inside a hidden partition. You're able to control how much that partition can grow to and how much of that data that it can capture. There is a warning that as you approach filling up that protected space, you can get a warning so you know that you're likely to run out of space. So that answers the disk space question. Can you search for specific indicators of compromise, like IP addresses, registry keys, etc.? The answer is no, you cannot, not in the current version. We are working with SentinelOne. They have a capability called deep visibility and file integrity monitoring. And what that'll allow us to do is, based on there being a threat, we can then do a search based on the indicator of compromise, a registry key, a hash, a checksum, or whatever, and we can search the entire network. That's not available in the product today. It is coming in the future. Another great question. So there's another question here about how lightweight is the agent. The nice thing is this is a single agent to deploy. So in terms of managing and deploying, very easy to do. It's a single agent. It's rather lightweight. So in our testing, we've tested this. There's no appreciable CPU lag or memory hit for you. So you'll find that as it's running, it's offering protection, but it's invisible or transparent to the end user. They're not going to find it slowing down. Now, I do say that with a caveat. If you're running one of today's machines, so if you're running an i5 or an i7, you're certainly not going to see a problem. But if you're still running a really, really old machine with a low amount of memory, chances are you're going to see some sort of effect. So you would have to trial this to make sure it actually does this. Can it be deployed through the RMM console? Yes, we have automation scripts available to you that will allow you to deploy that single agent to all the devices under management. We also have an automation script and we have a template which will allow you to monitor the status and the health of the EDR protection you're offering today. And those are available directly from us. So if you don't have them, contact our support and they'll be pleased to give you a link to give you those automation scripts and the templates for monitoring purposes. Okay, looks like the questions are slowing down. Let me do one last call for questions. So if anyone's got a question, please fire them into the question pod and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, nice question. So somebody's asking, if the system is protected by SolarWinds EDR, should there be an additional antivirus engine? The answer is no. EDR will give you all the protection that AV gives you, plus more. Now, I understand you haven't used EDR, so what I would recommend, if you're going to be trialing this, run it in the detect only mode. So that will give you an alert that it's found something that your AV solution may not have found. Bear in mind, if you have two AV solutions on the same machine, one of them at some point is going to find the other. That's why you should never have two solutions. But in our case, you can have SentinelOne and you can have it in detect only mode, and that will give you alerts, some of which you may need to act on, some of it just may tell you that it's found the other solution. But you would never need to run two solutions on the same device. Sorry, I've got a question and I can't show you the question. Can you please show lateral movement is visualized in the forensics? I bear in mind, this is a demonstration system and there are 92,000 unresolved threats on this system. Back when I started demonstrating SentinelOne and we started trialing it, there were about 30,000 threats, and the threats that I needed to see and be able to show you things were easy to find. Now being 92,000, I can't always find a particular threat. But what would happen is if it was a lateral movement, the indicators of compromise would indicate that it was trying to move laterally across the network. And chances are there would be something else to indicate it was also a threat. So I can't show you it because I can't find an example to show you, but the indicator of compromise would show that to you. Is SentinelOne firewall like web protection? Yes and no. So it does behave like web protection in that I can block certain sites, but our web protection product allows me to block by category. So I can block gaming sites, I can block social media sites, I can block sports sites or email. Within SentinelOne, you block it by IP or domain name, so you would have to have a list. One of the things that I want to do, we'd love to offer you a trial. If you would like to trial SolarWinds EDR, please reach out to your distributors and they can provide you with those trials. The requirement is you must be an active RMM or N-Central contract running because we will only sell to existing customers. So reach out to your distributor, tell them whether you're an RMM customer or an N-Central. Sorry, they'll know. Tell them you'd like to start a trial of SolarWinds EDR, and you can try for yourself. You'll see the different settings that are available. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Okay, there is a question about the blacklisting. Is there an option to blacklist all sites? There is not. We blacklist, you can inherit the global list, so we can block sites that SentinelOne have found and determined to be malicious. You can add additional sites to blacklist, but there is no such thing as blocking everything and then turning certain things on within the blacklist. Now, if you need to be that restrictive as to what that device can communicate with, what I would suggest you might want to do is to go into firewall control and only allow that device to talk to a specific server. We had a customer running a retail operation. They had a number of point of sale devices, and they had a central server that did the communication with the payment gateway. What we did is we set up with the firewall that the point of sale devices could only communicate with the server and couldn't communicate anywhere else. Therefore, they weren't able to download malicious payloads. They weren't able to send any kind of information outside of the network. And with that, the questions look like they've dried up. So either I've bored you to tears, or I've satisfied you, or have at least piqued your curiosity. As I said, if you'd like to follow up, and the next step is you'd love to have a trial, please contact your distributor and they can help get you set up. You just need to be an active customer of either our RMM platform or of our N-Central platform. Thank you very much for taking the time today. I hope this has been valuable for you. And as I said, any further questions, please contact your distributor. Thank you very much, and I'll be ending the webinar now. Oh, sorry, one last question. Is this endpoint only? It's whatever Windows, Mac, or Linux device you want to be running. So even though I've said endpoint, it could be a server, it could be an email server, it could be a web server, it could be a file server, database server. As long as it's running one of those operating systems, we consider that to be an endpoint and we'll protect it. Thank you very much.